Ladies and gents, I'm Arnold Smit from Stellenbosch Business School. I'm your host for the afternoon, as we will be having our webinar with our guest, our special guest, Kevin Chaplin, which I will introduce to you in a little while. At USB, we say that there are certain features that drive us in terms of our total educational effort. The one is that we want our students, as they leave their studies, to be responsible leaders in society and also at the same time stewards of society. And when we talk about responsible leadership, we talk about it in three layers, if you wish. We talk about the leader as a person, as an individual, taking responsibility for your own life, your decisions, the impact thereof, on others, on society and the environment. We also talk about responsible leadership in a relational setting. We are related to other people. You cannot talk about responsibility if you are not talking about relationships. You can't talk about responsible leadership if you are not talking about relationships. And what does that mean when we talk about it from a relational perspective? And then lastly, when we talk about responsible leadership, we also refer to the leader as a citizen. I often say to students or to people on executive programs, the person in the boardroom must make decisions in such a way that when that person leaves the boardroom and goes out, and the person goes out again, you must be able to live with what you've decided as a customer, as a citizen, as a spouse, as somebody in society, so that there is integrity straight throughout from the one to the other in terms of the different roles that we play. So for us then, it overlaps quite in a huge sense, responsible leadership with being a steward of society. And what a marvelous example do we have with us this afternoon in the person of Kevin Chaplin, who is a speaker. He's well known for that on many occasions with thought-provoking insights about his work. Kevin has also covered careers in banking and the nonprofit world. He started out with a BCom degree in accounts and business economics, a diploma in banking, and also an executive management program that he completed at UCT's GSB. And then in banking, he filled quite a few positions as provincial manager, sales and services director, a director of finance and human resources and admin, and national industrial relations manager. And if this was not enough already of a full career, his career at some point took a turn. Call it a U-turn if you wish. Being so well prepared in the corporate environment, he then became fully involved in the social sector. He founded the South African Ubuntu Foundation, then eventually took over the Amy Beale Foundation, and as part of that initiative, they also built a youth skills center costing 8 million rands and playing a huge role in terms of youth skills development, especially in something very important at the time, such as what we are in at the moment. And he was also endorsed by the Melvin Jones International Fellowship, get a fellow award there, and also the Paul Harris Fellow Award. And then finally, he came up with this wonderful book in which you will just read of the same energy and enthusiasm and passion that I believe that we will experience this afternoon in the conversation with him, a book with a short title, Can Do. Kevin, I would like to kick off by bringing you into the picture. I've just said that we look at responsible leadership at USB from a kind of a three-layered perspective. And I would like to start with something very personal in your life. When I read the book, one of the things that came out for me in terms of your story is one about navigating transitions from one situation to the other, one context to the other, but very specifically so with a particular sense of purpose in mind, finding a pathway for your career going forward. that was just very characteristic. And if I can ask a question about that, how did this play out for you? You started as a young person in a particular context, and look, where are you today? But you had to make some decisions along the way. How did that pan out for you?
Thanks, Professor, and good afternoon, everybody. It's really good to be with you all. I'm really excited for this opportunity, so thank you for joining. Yeah, interesting, Arnold. I never in my wildest dreams thought that I would leave banking. When I was at school in grade 12, it was all about going into hotel management, and then I got a change of opportunity because all white males at that time had to go off to the Defense Force, and I went off to the Navy, and that changed everything. And then I decided to go into business and become a banker, which I absolutely loved. And it was only much later in life as a banker that things really developed. And I think I was given many opportunities to change direction and have transitions. So I'd like to share what made that possible to make those transitions. The first one was obviously going to Johannesburg. As a person in Durban, everyone said, you'll never enjoy Joburg. But you know what? I went there with enthusiasm and an open mind and made the most of it. The next one was, you will never enjoy Cape Town. You're never going to turn the business around, because I was sent to Cape Town to run the business, and we did it. The next thing was, obviously, I wanted to leave the bank because, hang on, I was 41, didn't want to go back to Johannesburg, and everybody, are you mad? How can you leave that top position? You're never going to make it out there. Impossible. And then after starting the South African Ubuntu Foundation, which I share a lot in the book about that journey, how I got there, so I'm just obviously glazing over it. But the next one was when the Amy Beale Foundation was bankrupt, and Amy's mother came to close it down, and I said, but you can't close it. South Africa needs an organization like that for the youth. And she said, well, then take it over and run it. I think what made all those steps possible, despite everybody saying you can't, you're mad, you mustn't do it, was first of all being comfortable with who I was. As I grew from childhood into teens, I learned very fast that you have to accept yourself for who you are. There's a part in the book where I share about my childhood, about a father who hated me and what happened there and how I overcame that hatred. That's another long story. But I had to accept who I was, get over my insensitivities. And I think that's important. It enables you to make a step. When you don't bring your past into your future, that's important. Too many people, I find, take whatever's happened in their past and carry it into their future. Then you can't make those bold steps. The other thing was I surrounded myself with the right people. That definitely had a big part to play, because as opposed to, yes, there were people saying, don't do it, you're mad. There were other people saying, well, like my wife, for instance, well, if that's what you want to do, I'll support you. And I had surrounded myself with the right people. And I think that, for me, is so important in life. And then the other one was I've got a strong faith and with God, and that always enabled me to, first of all, pray about something, but not sit back and wait. I always believe you've got to work hard. You can pray, but it's no good not working hard. God will open doors and close doors. And that happened many times. When I first made the decision to leave banking, an opportunity opened up to go and run Cape Nature. And I thought, wow, that's God's plan for me. And I was going to go and do it. And boom, that door closed. But I'll share a bit more about that. It was quite an interesting how that door closed and why. Yeah. It had very much to do with skin color and all sorts of things. Then another opportunity came up within a short time to go and run a private bank. And I thought, that's why I didn't get the other job. God's plan is that. Boom, I'm going to go and do that job. Whoop, that door closed again. Yeah. And so doors will close and doors will open. And then the third one was, I'm going to start something myself. And I spent a whole year planning the South African Ubuntu Foundation. And it was 3 months after I left banking and started that the Amy Beale Foundation went bankrupt. So it's really, I think, about, surrounding yourself with the right people, learning as you go. All my life, I've believed in learning to grow. Two of the things that I always believed in was ego must be out of it. If you've got ego, you're never going to make the transition. And ego can also be seen as edging God out, EGO, edge God out. And then GRO, if you want to grow, get rid of negative people, get rid of certain behaviors. Sometimes it's not even about seeing a psychologist in terms of letting go of your past. It might just be finding somebody you're comfortable with to share and overcome to enable you to make that transition. So that's a long answer, but I know we haven't got too much time. I can go on.
Yeah. I would just like to pick up one thing, and we do not need to discuss it further, but maybe also for the sake of the conversation and who's in the call, is that you did in fact refer to spirituality, to faith. And for those of you who are going to read the book, there's a particular sentence in the book that caught my attention on page 215. Everything is possible for those who believe. And I do think that nowadays we see more and more a realization that spirituality is closely related to how we connect with others. It's closely related to our connection with community work. It's closely related to how we think about and live sustainability. So research is actually telling us at the moment much more about this whole idea of going deep inside in terms of our values, our beliefs, in order to connect to the outside and become involved in life and community and society in general. So following down that line, it was quite something to read in the book also, Kevin, in terms of your ability to build relationships with quite a broad array of people. I mean, I read in the book about your relationships with mentors, special people that you went to for advice, your relationship with your staff, in business as well as in the NGO environment, your relationships with business associates, whilst you were in business as well as thereafter, your relationships with funders and sponsors and everybody on this call, and I noticed quite a few of them who are deeply involved in the NGO environment will know how difficult those relationships can become, complicated in a sense they can become. And then also, and maybe just once again, something about the book itself. It's covered with pictures, but you will see Kevin all the time in context of multi-gender, multiracial, and interfaith relationships in so many of the pictures that are being shared. So a question that comes to mind for me is how do you go about building relationships of diversity and inclusion? Because I don't think we can do social impact work properly if we are not embedded in the sense that we need to do it with people across the board, irrespective. So how do you go about building such relationships? What's your approach?
Thanks, Arnold. I think very much a philosophy of not trying to force my belief on somebody. As a committed Christian, a lot of my best friends are Jewish, Muslim, Hindu, and I love it when I'm the only Christian at a Jewish bar mitzvah or at a Muslim wedding. And that's because I respect their religion, and I think that's missing in the world. There's too much of that where people are trying to force their way, and it's their way or no way. And it's about respect. So very much that part. And then making it a win-win relationship. So little things, if I look back, one of the biggest losses for me was that I never was able to mix with black, colored, Indian people, Jewish growing up. It was only when I started working that I realized there was a warmth about people of other color, culture, religion, language. And I learned that from Archbishop Tutu, who always said, when you open yourself up to others, you benefit. And I have benefited tremendously from being with Hindu, Muslim, Jewish friends, different color. And I think from the start, it was about being genuine. So they could see I was sincere in the relationship. I think too many times people will talk down to somebody, not meaning it. It's not intentional sometimes, but they actually talk down to someone of another who's different to them. They're trying to be nice or they don't know how to handle it. And the best way is just to be genuine, because the other party realizes very quickly that this person's sincere. I started probably in about 2000, 2001, starting to teach myself a little bit of Xhosa, for instance. I even, when I was growing up in Durban, I learned a bit of Gujarati, and because I had a lot of Indian friends, I tell a story in there where I would sneak into Verulam in Durban, which is an Indian population, and my mother would have a heart attack because how can her son go in there? What are the neighbors going to think, But I started learning a bit of that. And then as I met more Black African people, I started trying to learn their language. And that was phenomenal for me. It opened up. Most of them said, wow, no white person's ever even tried to learn one sentence. And the secret was I taught myself one sentence a week. I didn't try and learn the whole language. Molo, Unjani, Intipilile, India Kukumbula Kakulu was my favorite one in the early days, because I would phone up a Black friend and say, hey, Sisi, India Kukumbula Kakulu. And she'd say, who's this? Oh, getting fresh here. Because India Kukumbula Kakulu is, I miss you. Ah, Kevin, it's you. You sounded just like a Black man. I was going to get angry. So, and that, when you start that, it just breaks down any barrier. The same as if I'm with a Muslim friend. I mean, it was only about 15 years ago that I realized the whole of my Old Testament and the Jewish Old Testament is in the Quran. Now you start thinking, okay, let's explore that. Let's have discussions. So I think that's how I recommend and how I built relationships that were diverse, that were inclusive, the sincerity, the genuineness, and it being a win-win. It's not all about what's in it for me. Like let's say when I met Archbishop Desmond Tutu or Yvonne Chaka Chaka or Raymond Ackerman, where I talk about how I met them, what they meant to me in the book, because there's some very important lessons from that, which is why I wrote the book. I want to share everything I learned with others. But with all of them, it wasn't just, they could see that I didn't want to just get out of them because they were famous. It was, what could I do for them as well?
But there was a specific, I think, experience that was quite a highlight to read in the book, where FNB did something very special to almost tumble its staff into this awareness of the rich diversity of the South African society. And this was when you had to go out and find your way with a taxi to a place where you could stay an overnight in a township. Would you like to briefly share something about that particular moment, what it meant for the bank and your staff, and how that might have played a role in terms of your future engagements?
Thanks, Arnold. Yes, it was quite a profound time because most people were terrified. How could we go into a Black township? This was in the early 2000s. So it's only, 18 years ago. But I realized very quickly that once you take away the fear element, so there were staff members in our group that were terrified to go in, and we forced them in. And once they went in, oh, wow. I mean, I got the one story I share is I got a phone call from one of my branch managers to say, Kevin, I'm not going into the township. Are you crazy? They'll steal my car. So I said, okay, we'll come in my car. No, you drive a Mercedes. Okay, I'll hire a bus then. We'll go in a taxi. And once I took her in, and she doesn't mind, I tell her it's Yumna. And once Yumna came in, wow, okay, she hugged the mama of the restaurant. Then the next group I took in, because I took them in groups, I took my managers in groups of 20, and then I said, your staff must go in after that. I think I had about 100 managers between relationship managers, branch managers, credit managers. The next group, Shamila phoned me, says, how can you take me to the township to lunch? You're insulting me. You know I'm halal. I said, Shamila, you think there's no halal restaurants? Come. And that Shamila went in after that and opened something like 100 accounts. All she needed was that barrier to be broken down. So it showed me what's possible when you break down the barriers, you get people to engage and meet one another. And that for me was quite significant because it started turning the business around. When I arrived in Cape Town in 2000, everybody in Joburg, you'll never turn it around. They're the worst performing. And I go into a lot of detail in the book about how we turned it around from the worst performing to the top performing in 4 years. And I don't know, we can't go into all of that, but one of them was definitely this experience, because after that, the staff went in, and before, a messenger of a corporate would come in with the banking, and the teller would just stamp it like the post office and not even greet. After that, the teller would greet even the messenger, because now they see the messenger as a person. And what does the messenger go back to their bosses? Wow, I love banking there. It's wonderful. And we started seeing the business turn around. There were many other things I share. That was one of them, which we were able to turn it around in 4 years. And it was definitely through the people. We did it through the people.
I think what comes out for me there is something that I've learned from somebody else many years ago, is that if you want something to happen spontaneously, organize it. In other words, if you would like something to become second nature, make a discipline, make a habit of it, and help people to get the exposure, to become comfortable, and being able to start learning how to cope with something that they might not have been used to before. So I think it brings us close to what I would like to spend a significant amount of time on with you. Is there's a point in the book, and this is where I would like now to come from, a little bit sharing about yourself as an individual to the relational environment and how you nourish relationships, but now more to the leadership in society environment. There's a point in the book where you make a very specific statement on page 146. I had become community-minded. Because I think in the end, whereas you have had such a marvelous career in banking itself, it's probably fair to say that your life work eventually became the work in the SA Ubuntu Foundation, and more specifically so eventually with the Amy Foundation. So in view of this statement, I had become community-minded. How did this community-mindedness for you come about, and how did it change your life and your perspective on life, and then also your involvement and career from that point onwards? When was that, and what transpired since?
Thanks, Arnold. It was very much my arrival in Cape Town and the challenge of turning the business around, as I said. Firstly, there were quite a few of my managers that would pray for the business, and that opened my eyes that, hey, you can be bold. Whilst respecting others, I used to also hold lunches for our customers. So as the head of the area, I would host it. My relationship management invite their customers, and I would always insist that we stay grace. But I would make it an all-inclusive grace, which I learned very early on, and that helped. People would come and say, wow, that's never been done. And then then it started getting the staff to be more bold about it. But then the next one, which made me really open my mind to community importance in business, was meeting people like Raymond Ackerman, Philip Kravitz, Helen Lieberman, and various. Interestingly enough, it was all the Jewish people that got me onto the socially minded thinking, because I started thinking Christians go to church on a Sunday and then you don't hear from them in between. But when I meet these wonderful Jewish people, they are doing so much, it comes naturally to just want to get out there and make a difference. I mean, I go into a lot of detail of, how Raymond Ackerman, how his business grew, because he said to me, Kevin, what you give, you get back. Philip Kravitz, the same, in terms of running Cape Union Mart like that, very socially minded. Now, when I started interacting with them, I started thinking, well, I can use my position as sales and service director to make a difference. So it just really channeled my spirituality into be able to for God to use me to make a difference. And too many people think, well, I want to work in the nonprofit world to do that, or go and be a missionary. No, whatever role we play, whether you're a head of a department or you're on a board, you can influence the organization to helping the community. It was quite funny because our bank had a national budget for CSI, and people started saying, well, why is the Western Cape getting the biggest chunk of the national CSI of FNB? And they said, well, Kevin's the only one that really brings proposals and convinces us to help others. We never get anything from the other provinces. So it really just catapulted me into, I think, a direction where I knew God had a purpose. I didn't know what that purpose was, but I found it, that my purpose was to really make a difference in other people's lives. That's really, I mean, even if I think, Arnold, in line of community mindedness, it was Raymond Ackerman who said to me, the bottom line will come, because we have to be careful. I always feel you can't focus, if you're there to run a business, you can't do too much CSI and then the profit suffers. There's got to be a balance. So I found that very early on, and I think that's the challenge for all businesses. What is that balance? But if you focus on the community, for me, it was, as the banker, I wanted to make sure I made a difference in my staff's lives, from every branch that they worked in, their families, and then my customers, that when they walked through the banking hall, they had the best experience possible. I really was passionate about the business, and then using the business to make a difference in the community. And we did. We turned it around through that. A simple one, I challenged all my managers. I said, let's run a table of peace and unity. We'll get 100 pensioners who never get a visitor for a year. Let's invite those pensioners to a lunch. And everyone said, but what a waste of time. They've got no money. I said, let's just do it. Anyway, I go into a long story about how we did it, what we did, but we did it. And those same people afterwards said, thank you so much for encouraging us to run this table. We didn't want to do it. We did it. Our lives have changed. And guess what? Some of those old age homes started bringing their business to FNB. Some of those pensioners' families who were wealthy brought their money to us. So that was a typical example of being community mindedness, and then the business changes. And it did affect my family. That was your other question. I mean, at the time when I decided to move on from banking, my one daughter was only 9. And when I said, Daddy's decided to leave the bank and go and do his own business, and she was like in tears. She says, but Daddy, how are we going to live? Will I have to change schools? How are we going to get money? I said, well, God has blessed me for 25 years. Why would he stop now? And I was able to show her on doing it that he did. I mean, I've never worked as hard as I did at the bank, but I've been more rewarded in other ways.
Yeah. So I'm very glad that you highlight the fact that you can build an organization for social relevance and impact, whether you're working in the business environment, whether you're working in government, whether you're working in the social sector. It's not something that is organizationally specific, but it is the case, I think, that we could say that these various organizations are differently capacitated to fulfill their roles. And one could possibly, not possibly, I think definitely say that in the case of business, there is indeed a lot of capacity. So one of, I think, the critical turns in your life in recent years have been taking on the challenge of almost rebuilding the Amy Foundation from scratch. And I think this is perhaps one of the most gripping stories in the book itself. Of course, the Amy Beale story is there, and that is a story that many of us still remember quite vividly. But then there was a request extended to you, that you're probably the person who is well suited for picking up the pieces and rebuilding Amy to what it is today. So what I would like to ask, in a sense, as an ultimate test of both your life's purpose as well as your leadership effectiveness, how did you go about doing that?
Well, firstly, I'm glad you mentioned that I share the story, because there's a lot of misperceptions about the Amy Beale story. It happened in 93, so it's a long time ago. And there's a lot of people who have the story wrong. So I put it into perspective in the book, and I share the true facts. I think the real test was when I said yes to Amy's mother. I didn't realize it was going to be so tough. I saw it as God giving me an opportunity to take a business and turn it around and build it again, which had been what I'd enjoyed as a banker. But once I took it over, the first email that I got was from somebody in the US who said, "Oh, I see you've taken over the Amy Beale Foundation. Well, then you deserve the same death as Amy. Don't you know whites are the supreme race?" And that shocked me. I couldn't believe this. I'd got such an email. And then once the word got out that I'd taken over the Amy Beale Foundation, there were a lot of people who said, "Oh, Kevin, don't waste your time. Why do you want to waste your time with something like that? You've got bigger things planned for you." And so it was about not listening to those sort of people and going with what I believed was the right path. The next thing was also having two of the guys who killed Amy work for me. I got a lot of resistance from people who knew me even and said, "How can you employ murderers? Are you mad?" Until I could explain to them that it's two of the four boys. These two men are the most remarkable men that I've been blessed to work with. And I say that with all sincerity. And Tobacco and Easy, they were only 18 at the time. We don't have time to go into the whole story, but it was a peaceful political rally at the time. Black people were not allowed to congregate. So the police broke up the rally and a mob formed. Amy was in the wrong place at the wrong time, and the mob got out of control. Having met Easy and Tobacco when I took over also was a big change for me, because I could see what wonderful men these were now. I mean, they were 18, as I said, 18 at the time, but they became good fathers to their children and good husbands, which I think is significant because that's lacking in South African society. South Africa has not produced a society of good men to be husbands or fathers. And these two are two of the best that I still today stand and tell you. And then so many people, I mean, we one of the things I decided to, when I took over Amy Beale Foundation, was to run it like a business. Too many people see NGOs as a waste of time, so they label people, and that was hard. You're an NGO man, you're gonna run an NPO, what a waste of time. I had to change that perception and not let it get me down. And I really worked hard at that and got people to realize how important an NGO is if you run it well. Sadly, I think the stats are something like over 70% of nonprofits close down every 3 years or after 3 years, and new ones start up all the time. And it's for various reasons, whether it's inefficiency, corruption, greed, whatever. So I was determined to show that we could run a nonprofit and make it sustainable, despite people saying that. And it gave me the opportunity. Some of my staff were even criticized for having Tobacco and Easy with us, but it was the best thing I did was to keep them on. And guess what? I saw very early on what a wise leader in Tobacco was. And I invested time in making him the program manager of the foundation. He was scared at the time. He said, "No, I can't be a program manager." I said, "Of course you can. I'll get you mentorship and growth." And you know what? He grew to become the program manager of over 2,000 kids, running 5-6 centers. Eventually in 2018, he said to me, "Kevin, it's too big for me now." He was very honest. He said, "It's too big. I don't sleep at night. You need somebody with more skills. And my passion is to be an entrepreneur." Throughout him being program manager, I had encouraged him to start his own little businesses to create wealth for himself. I said to all the staff, by working for Amy Foundation, you're never going to become wealthy, but you can do other things. So in Tobacco started a transport business, a meat business. He then ended up starting a laundry in Gugulethu, a laundrette, which grew so much that he then said he wants to go and do that. So I said, "Okay, well, stay with me, do projects for me, but I'll let you go and do your." So he now runs these businesses, and the laundrette is doing so well. So despite, the tests of don't do it, give it up, by being confident of, this was part of God's plan for me and not listen to the naysayers, I was able to get through that.
Yeah, and I would like to encourage everybody to read specifically that story, because from where you've picked it up to where it is today, I think is really something to read as a gripping story, as I've said before, but the story full of challenges, together with the opportunity, of course, that came with it. So having walked this journey, And with the people with us on this call this afternoon, if you want to give advice to anybody and saying, so how do you take the first step? If this is somebody sitting here and say, but we are in a society filled with need at the moment. We are in a COVID context. I would like to become involved in some way or another. Where do I start? It might also be that there might be people on this call with us sitting here and say, you know what, I've built something, and what we are faced with at the moment is impacting my organization quite negatively, and we might be at risk of having to revise, having to re-strategize. And I've also seen NPOs closing as a result, for instance, of what is happening at the moment. There are also people on this in this meeting with us who are seasoned in this space, and I would like to invite so long that you think about questions that you would like to ask Kevin, because we will do that in a minute or so. So this can-do attitude as a leverage for getting involved or regaining strength in a sense. Again, what advice do you have for others in terms of social impact and engagement?
Arnold, I think first of all, it's to take a deep search within yourself. What is your passion? Where does your passion lie? Is it with abuse or children or animals or the environment? So find that passion. I was never scared to say to my staff in banking, if you want to go and be a jewelry designer, don't do me any favors by staying here as a banker. Go and do it. So find your passion, know what it is, pray about it. Very important, whatever religion, pray about it, look for those opportunities where God will close and open the door. And then, so again, surround yourself, make sure you've got the right people, share. I always found that if you keep something to yourself, you'll never do it. So share with the right people. I want to go and do this. I've got this idea. I want to go and help here. What do you think? Share it. If you keep it to yourself, it'll never come to fruition. So that, I think, is the first steps to making it happen. Share it, find that passion, and then align yourself with an organization that has the same values as you. Don't go and work for an organization or even go and help in the community where the values are not aligned to your own values and principles. That's very important. Don't steer away from your own values and principles in doing things, because that will be, you won't be true to yourself and you will steer off course. So I think I'm just conscious of the time. Those are the best advice I can give in the shortest.
Thank you for that. What comes back to my mind is a belief that sometimes we think that you need to know before you can do. And in that sense, you kind of theorize yourself into involvement. But I think in this space, you actually act yourself into new ways of thinking. Start, as Kevin has said, with something concrete in the context of where you can reach out to others and share a vision and so on as you continue along this pathway.
And I think also not to be overwhelmed by trying to do too much too quickly.
Of course.
Rome wasn't built in a day. So, just take little steps. Some people say, oh, my little thing that I'm doing is so small. No, it'll grow. Everybody's small efforts can become like a tidal wave. So don't try and think a little step is not an important step.
Yeah, and it's about finding the connections with others and become part of networks of impact that strive together towards making society better. Ladies and gents, at this point in time, I would like to open the floor, and it's also an invitation for you to open your cameras, and in that sense, to become part of the conversation as a whole. And if there's anybody that would like to raise a hand and say, Kevin, there's something that I would like you to address. What do you think about this? What do you think about that? How would you like to go about something of this nature? And so there is an opportunity now to engage with Kevin. I think he has become so seasoned in this world of transitioning, of connecting, of building social impact and relevance in the corporate environment, as well as in the social sector environment, And having gone through the trenches, really, if you read aspects of the story specifically around the Amy Foundation. So we've got a source of experience with us. Anybody who would like to go, just raise your hand, and then I would like to give you the opportunity.
I hope somebody asks a question.
Yeah. They say in this environment online, you need to wait a few seconds longer, Kevin, before people start responding. So please, anybody, you're most welcome. Just open your camera for us, give an indication. Even if you want to share something, you do not necessarily need to ask something. You might want to share something, and you're welcome to do that as well.
Maybe while we're waiting for a question, I think now there's no better time than now with the corona pandemic that's happening, Arnold. I think Indeed. Everybody's got the opportunity in some small way to make a difference. I think we can either just look back and say this happened in history, or we were part of changing lives in that part of history, because I think too many times people don't take a stand. We've seen gender-based violence rise. It's not just the corona pandemic. Gender-based violence has risen, racism. So it's about taking a stand, all of us, and saying, what can I do? Whether it's being a responsible person, going out there and wearing my mask, whether it's if I see somebody throwing a cigarette butt out the window, hooting to them because it can cause a fire. My kids hate it if they're with me in the car, because if I see somebody throwing a cigarette butt out, I hoot at them, or if I see them on the phone. And it's small ways we can take a stand. We can either, if we hear the neighbor beating their partner, we can just close the window and bluff it didn't happen, or we can call the police, So This pandemic has made us realize we can all be doing something. Also change our business. It's been so impressive how many businesses have changed direction to adapt, whether it be making masks or, feeding schemes. There's an opportunity.
So it's about the mindset that we create in the process and build the skills that go together with that. I don't see hands. Is that Louise, please, you're welcome. Just unmute and then you're welcome.
I'm going to be brave. I just recently started to investigate becoming involved in some sort of way in the community. I was sort of prompted to become involved in Days for Girls, which provides hygiene wear to girls through a missionary contact that I had, and I had a request for people to sponsor pads, and I thought it wasn't a good idea. So I started reading up, etc. I think what I want to say, maybe, and one comment from you, Kevin, is that on the one side, I would like to be part of an organization that has very good oversight and not function in isolation. And on the other side, it's quite complex to really become involved. I find it very difficult to make contact with the right people, to get feedback, to have people respond to emails and telephone numbers, and to really know what to do in this situation, because there seem to be quite strict guidelines and you have to adhere to certain requirements and do certain courses with this organization specifically. And it's not that easy to really adhere to all of those things, and specifically to network with the right people. So maybe your advice, please.
Thanks, Louise. Yeah, it can be quite off-putting when you contact an NPO and they never come back. I'm a resident lecturer for the University of Miami, and they send 10 students a year to me, and part of their studies here is they've got to do some community service. And it's always quite scary how they approach nonprofits, and 90% of them don't come back to them. But the trick I've learned is not to give up. There are quite a few organizations. I'm happy that you can email me. If you're interested in the hygiene of girls, it's a very important area because so many of them don't attend school because of it. We have obviously started doing that with our young girls, but we've also partnered with two good organizations who are working in that field, and I can give you their names because they are in every sort of field of work. There are a lot of organizations. So email me and I'll give you those. and then approach them as well. Don't give up when the first one or the second one. I've had to learn in my life to be, the word is tenacious, persevering. Don't give up when you don't get the answers the first time, and eventually you'll find the right organization. So now I will help you with that.
Thank you, Kevin. Doris, you're welcome.
Hi, Doris.
Hello, Kevin. Just a question. Over the past few years, we have seen a little bit of more grey emerging between the for-profit and the not-for-profit types of organizations. And for me, it's a very inspiring thought to see how they are moving closer and closer. If you had to put your foresight hat on, do you think we are moving towards a time where we will have one kind of organization, or more of just this grayish in the middle?
I don't think we'll ever have one type of organization, because it's very important to separate them. Not everybody, a business has to be profitable to be able to help. So it's no good being totally, focused on CSI then the business suffers and you don't make enough profit to be able to help. So I really see that it should be still separate, but working together. There should be 3 spheres in a country: government, business, and nonprofit. That to me are the 3 important parts of a business. When government and business respect nonprofits, give them support, because there's nothing worse than a nonprofit working so hard and not getting the support. But obviously the nonprofit has to have the right building blocks. That's why I said one of my aims was to make sure the Amy Foundation, when I'm long dead and gone, is sustainable. It's got a strong base to work from. Audits, very important to get audits. Some of the challenges, chapter 21 in the book shares quite a huge challenge I faced with death threats and all sorts of things, and media taking the wrong story. But because we had a strong corporate governance in place, we were able to overcome it and turn it around to our advantage. So I rather see the 3 spheres being well run, because nonprofits do have a bad name. As I said, 70% closed down. Nonprofits need to be built up. Businesses can help them with that. Just like we've been helping schools now teach the principle how to run your school like a business. They were never taught that until 5 years ago. So that's how I see it happening. And then businesses having a strong social impact mindset, CSI department, being run by leaders who believe in it, not just doing it because, if you're a business and you give money to a nonprofit, you get a Section 18A tax certificate. You score BE points, so we better do it. No, that's the wrong mindset. A business that believes in helping the community, just like Raymond Ackerman and Pick and Pay did at Cape Union Mart. That's why they're so successful, because from day one, that was Raymond Ackerman's mindset, and everybody in the business believed it. I always say as well, if you find in your business somebody who doesn't play out the same values, don't be shy to say, look, I think it's time for you to leave this business. If it's a person who's really not so, who's pulling the business back by being rude to customers or being rude to the community, you don't want that person in your business. There's no harm in saying, you've got to change. I'm going to try and help you. But at the end of the day, if you're not going to have the same values, then this is not the business for you. But run it like a business. Long answer. I hope I've answered it.
Kevin, I think you might expect an invitation from the Institute for Future Studies to take this conversation a bit further. Doris works for IFR at USB, so it might just be a worthwhile conversation to follow up on, Doris.
I look forward to the email, Doris.
Ladies and gents, there's really time for one more. If anybody would like to jump in right here at the back and say, I would like to take the opportunity to make a contribution, you are so welcome.
Arnold, I would like
yes.
to...
Annika. There's Annika. I don't know where. Yeah, Annika, you're welcome.
Hi, sorry, I'm just trying to get my camera to work. Hi, Kevin, thanks so much for the inspiring session. I really enjoyed it. So what I'm doing at the moment is I'm trying to help a few nonprofits to get their things in order to try and tick the boxes that are required by corporates in terms of their CSI spending. So nonprofits who are trying to apply for corporate funding, so for their CSI targets. And do you have any advice on how to get those two things aligned? So on the one side, we have, for example, F&B. They have specific requirements before they can provide funding to nonprofits in terms of expectations and things that have to be in order on the nonprofit side. And then on the nonprofit side, we have a lot of uncertainty in terms of how do we get these things aligned with corporate companies. Do you perhaps have any advice on where to start or how to get these two sides together?
Sure, Annika. I think the first one is not to chase the money. So let's say a corporate says, if you do this, we'll give you 100,000 Rand. And then you change your whole mission and vision and statement to get that. And then somebody else says this, and then there's different criteria. You've got to be very careful. Many years ago, I was offered a lot of money if I opened an office in Johannesburg and Limpopo for Amy Foundation. And I said, no, there's enough need in the Western Cape. Look how many people are in Khayelitsha, Gugulethu. I need to focus here. So I declined that. And so I think very much make sure you stick to that organization, whoever the nonprofit is, stick to their core mission and vision and statement. Put the building blocks in place. Make sure they're a registered nonprofit. They are registered with SARS as a PBO so that they can get a Section 18A certificate. Have a strong board. Then you look and say, now which corporates are playing in our arena? Because not every corporate wants to sponsor, for instance, Amy Foundation, it's children and youth. We've opened, one of the chapters in the book is we opened a youth skills center, which led to a whole new sort of field for us. But there's other nonprofits who only want to focus on hygiene for girls, for instance. So we're not going to waste time going to that organization and trying to convince them. We research which are the corporates who want to sponsor children and youth, and we only go to them. And we don't change everything we do just to meet their criteria. We meet with them, we engage with them and say, but why do you want this from us now? Is it really necessary? And have a healthy engagement with them. That's the best advice I can give. And I'm happy to continue the discussion if you'd like to email me and we can have a chat. I can put you in touch with some of my team who make sure the corporate governance is in place and they can share how we research which corporates to approach and then which ones not to. There's also some good media stuff around, like the Trialogue book, which shows what the corporate's focus is, and you can read up on that as well.
Yeah, that's really a good suggestion, is to read that. So Annika, the other answer that Kevin didn't give you, the title of the book is Can Do. The subtext that never appears on the front page, but which you have to read the book for, is never take no for an answer.
Yeah.
So I think on that note, we need to conclude. It has become 2:00. I would like to say thank you very much for all of you for your presence. The book is available that you can order from the SA Ubuntu website. So the website address, straightforward, saubuntu.co.za. And then if you are interested in the work of the Amy Foundation, it is equally straightforward, amyfoundation.co.za, Amy Foundation, all one word. Kevin, I would like to thank you for, and there you will also see Kevin's email address has just come up on the chat line, kchaplin@saubuntu.co.za, or Amy Foundation address is kevin@amyfoundation.co.za. So please get in contact with Kevin. I think he will feel privileged and honored if you do so, to continue with the conversation. I think he's got capacity for lots of conversations, building relationships, and taking you with him in terms of the way forward. Kevin, thank you very much for sharing with us. Thank you for sharing your passion. Thank you for publishing your story, because I think it's a story of hope. It's a story that we should read at a time such as this, when we as a world and as a country are being faced with such a complex challenge with such a huge impact on society. For those of you who are already involved in nonprofit organizations, stick to the task. I think in Kevin's words, I could also say, stick to your calling, your sense of purpose. In the end, I think it's about a life well lived. It's about making meaning and contributing meaning to the lives of other people. So thank you for joining us this afternoon. And Kevin, from our side, we wish you the best. We wish you blessings. And may you continue. And may you continue to give the quality leadership and to being such a shining example of what it means to be community-minded, as you have said it in the book yourself. So, thank you everybody. Have a good day.
Thank you everybody for listening. And anybody can contact me. I'll be happy to help where I can. And
thank you so much.
Thanks.